little bit about ACD Labs. I work for ACD Labs since 15 years. ACD Labs is a company, Toronto-based. We're creating software for analytical data processing, analytical data handling, and storage in a database. I want to tell a little bit about the topics to be covered. I think the importance of analytical data, I think from assumed trivial to extremely critical. There have been cases where suddenly analytical data were critical for FDA coming in asking for additional evidence of an impurity being there or not being there. Often that leads to that in the past that led to people going into the archive, putting the papers out, and trying to find the right spectra or the right LCMS spectra. Took a lot of while, a lot of panic, and people are certainly in the nowadays with outsourcing. There's a lot of value of having the right analytical data available immediately. The struggle of analytical data handling, there are different formats, different instruments, different vendors, and also the accessibility. So often the information is on the instrument available, but not in a central place. We've seen over the past years, although analytical data a long time has not been critical for organizations in making that business critical, we've seen that there's a tendency now, also the initiative with Allotrope, where people have come together and said we need to do something with the data. There have been initiatives for cloud, putting things on the cloud, automation. Data integrity has been mentioned as one of key things, and also externalization. Work done by CROs is far away from the actual customer of the data. Future automation, data capture, data integrity control, data exchange, enabling leading to an analytical data source that's available for data mining and project decisions. I think one of the initiatives of Allotrope to set up is to better data mine the data that has been collected. So ACD Labs has done a survey in 2015 and asked people how important analytical data was. Basically, 80% of the people said they rely on analytical data for decision making. Also, I think the people recognize that they would benefit from a better data searching and sharing of analytical data. And 70% of those people said that sharing data and interpretations between departments, partners, is valuable to my organization. So people recognize that the data is important. Still, it's not easily accessible. Furthermore, in the survey, it says that most people, 70% of the people, use up to 10 analytical instruments. So there's a big variety of the instruments. Furthermore, to do analysis and to identification and purification, people using, in most cases, 2 or more instruments for analyzing the data. And what also 90% of the people said they use multiple applications for analyzing the data, viewing and storing from instruments. Further in the survey was that people are still using paper copies, so they put spectra in notebooks. If they're still using notebooks, of course, paper notebooks. Basically, also, a lot of people are using internal reports. So that means that they have the analytical data collected, bundle it, and then create an analytical report. More and more people are using other software systems, or they're using electronic lab notebooks to store the information. For sharing with colleagues, it's still conversion printing. Even if they collect electronically, they print a paper document and share it. They talk about it, and they print images of the analytical data in order to share that with their colleagues. Most, or at least 50%, 50+%, is using raw data archive files That means that the raw data is archived, but the process data is either printed in PDF format or stored separately. A lot of people are using also the instrument vendor databases, but basically if you use multiple vendors inside your company, then not all the data can be stored in the same repository. And other people are using a central repository. That's about 1/3 of the people. So if people do a molecular characterization on paper, then they always create, or they in most cases create a certificate of analysis, or for instance, if they do force degradation, they have a force degradation report. That's usually varying in 1 page for a certificate of analysis, or a force degradation report can be up to 60 pages. It's coming from the instrument, and it's stored somewhere. Some people put it in a LIMS system, some people put it in an ELN. It's also that some of them store PDF files on servers or instrument computers. How to manage that analytical data that supports and characterize your experiments in your systems. And basically that's the question asked. How much human effort do you spend on preparing your report? I've worked with customers where it took them 2-3 weeks for creating a report that had to go to the FDA. And they would save quite a lot of time. And in that case, they saved quite a lot of time in just storing that information in one source and then creating one report. If things change, then creating that report is automatically done, or is a matter of pushing one button. The other thing is that if you have paper copies, then basically, how can you search on the results? I think that's one of the initiatives for Allotrope as well, is just making that data available and making it searchable. ACD Labs has been doing that for quite a long time, and storing the data in a database and make it searchable. Basically, one of the other things which is happening is also quality by design, and basically that puts more stringent requirements on the fact that you handle and you process your information in the same way. So if you're making a report for an authority, then it has to be the same report for the next compound or the next process. But basically, there is quite a lot of information. Too much human effort is spent on the transcription and the data transfer from the instrument to the systems to the reports. Basically, that's, if you see the amount of data that's going on, that's enormous. And I think that's also handled differently in the different companies. So at ACD Labs, we support quite a lot of formats, and there are quite a lot of formats out there. For NMR, it's not that much, for instance, NMR technique. For LCMS, there's quite a lot of instrument vendors and a lot of data types that are available and are available within one company. We're looking at techniques like LC-UV, NMR, GC, LCMS, Fourier transform infrared curves, but basically we're looking at XY curves in more general. And how good would it be if you could store that in one data source? Basically, people have been looking at data sources and where to store the analytical data. There are candidates there, ELN, LIMS, the raw data archives. Raw data archives store raw data, but not process data. A registry database, so you have your compounds and you have your analytical data connected to that compounds. Basically, there are, within ACD Labs, we've worked on getting everything stored. The product is called Spectrus. It's a proprietary database at the moment, but basically, we are able to handle, process all those data types, process them, or use processed information from the instrument, and then store that in a searchable way in the database. We're looking at making that format more open. We're working with Allotrope in order to convert our data to Allotrope, or to put Allotrope data in our database. So that's an active project we have ongoing. And basically, we're looking at also ways to more openly store the data and make that accessible. And accessible means searchable for basically on chemical structures, on spectral data, peaks, masses. In many ways you can search the data, but also the metadata which is connected to the analytical data.
Does that include the audit trail as well?
We have in our software an audit trail available, so you can exactly see what's done with the...
Does it include the audit trail from the CDS, for example?
At the moment, we start storing the ADF formats, then we have the complete audit trail. With the data that we are fetching, we are dependent on the vendors and what's made available to us. So not all the information, and I think Allotrope knows that as well, is not all the information is immediately made available. So what's new? Having access to analytical data internally and also for regulatory agencies. Basically, we see that we have an additional value in storing that analytical data. And we also see that we need to interact with the existing systems. So integration with an ELN, integration with a LIMS system, that's things we're actively working on with customers in order to implement that. If you look at the process furthermore, I think one of the things is that people are getting the information from the instrument, but they need to process that and need to handle that. And I think a lot of companies are creating a vast amount of data where manually processing is just not feasible anymore. What we see and working on is also tools for automation. So automatically process the data, automatically store the data, and automatically make that available for the end users, and linking that, for instance, into their experiments. So when it's coming from the instrument, we pick up the file, we have procedures to process that. We could even store that in an archive data. A data archive on a disk, use existing archiving tools. But basically also we would pick that data, fetch the things like parameters, but also the spectral data and LC data, and put that in our database and make it searchable. And then automatically from either a FIC or FIN client, you would have access to the data. And if the information is available, then it could be linked to, for instance, your record entry into the ELN system. We have those automation solutions available, and basically, that applies to NMR and LCMS. But for instance, what we also can do is to link that data together. And I think we could put that in one record and make it visible for the end user. What are the core competencies from ACD Labs? I think, as said, we have analytical data handling. We also have tools for, naming chemical structures, but also predictions of NMR, but also predictions of physchem properties. And I said one of the biggest assets from ACD Labs is the broad variety of analytical data that is available that we can handle and process. Having that data centrally available has also opened up for specific applications, and that's the things we've been working on lately as well, with having that data available in certain areas to make workflow solutions for users to efficiently comprehensive handling the data. One is in the area of metabolite identification, and the other is in the area of impurity management. Two products recently released, MetaSense and Luminata. What I will do is show a few screenshots. For the metabolite identification, you see that we have on the, that's working, on the left side we have a biotransformation scheme. You see the parent, the metabolites, And basically, by clicking on the individual structures, you will see the analytical data for the individual components. So the information which is stored in the repository is looked at in this specific way, where analytical data is really connected to biotransformation maps. Furthermore, we have the possibility for kinetic stability plots, and basically also one of the things that MetaSense can do is the reporting. So we can create reports that would be satisfactory for authorities and for internal reporting, and basically is containing all the information about biotransformation schemes and their analytical data. The other product, Luminara, is used for impurities handling and tracking. Basically, when doing reactions, impurities are formed. By looking at the analytical data, you can either identify the impurity, if it's occurring in ratios enough for the need to identification, and otherwise you can store it as an unknown so far for clarification later on. As well, here you can see that there's a graphical representation of the reactions and the impurities that are formed. And basically, for all the structures where analytical data is known, you will show the analytical data by clicking on the structure. It's also comparing with reference data. So at the moment you have isolated the compound, you can see the reference data at the same time as the measured data for that experiment. You can have multiple reaction schemes, compare them with each other, see where less impurities are formed. It's all in one system and available for you. The impurity maps, so you can see which reactions yield which impurities and how much, and basically how much of the impurity is formed. So it can be used in order to get a good overview of which impurities are formed in one reaction but not in the other. Also here, basically, as said, you can track the impurities across stages and batches, and you can see that if you're doing multiple experiments, you can see all the data of that as well. Next to that, I think one of the trends and one of the projects we're often working on now is just the externalization. People work with CROs, get data either available as a report, but not the actual underlying analytical data. And we've worked with Biogen. It's been published. They have presented on that, on a project where we pick up the data, the analytical data from the CRO, and then transfer that to the customers and make that available for them for searching. So that means that they not only get the summary report, but they also get the analytical data to the full extent inside their own system. And if they have questions, they can immediately look at that. Basically, we have recently connected the second CRO for this system, and we're looking at expanding that to more CROs for Biogen. And also, the system becomes interesting for the CROs, so they can provide the data to multiple customers. As a summary, I think we are building individual solutions on one foundation. We collect data centrally, but then use it in context. Examples, externalization, as said, metabolism schemes, impurities, degradations. And we hope to make that data also available for future data mining. I think, as said, we are active participant of the Allotrope project, and in the past we've been able to read to Allotrope and read from Allotrope and write to Allotrope. I think, if there are any questions, then I'm happy to answer them. Thank you for your attention.
Is there any question for Hans?
So on the last material that you presented with respect to the externalization platform, with Biogen being able to connect CROs, what investment does it take from the CRO to get connected? Because obviously they have their own infrastructure, their own software platforms. So how much investment do they have to make to connect in?
Basically, in the first couple of cases, the investment has been paid by by Biogen in this case. But yes, they need the infrastructure, and they need to make the data available. So there are some process steps that need to be done. In the whole process of preparing the data, at a certain stage, they free up the data and say, now it can go to the customer and not. And that's something where they have to do some work into their internal system. And basically, when they have a raw data storage, and usually they have that, we have the possibility to pick up the raw data files. And usually, there's also an information transfer from the customer to the CRO. And based upon that, we have the information what to pick up, what not to pick up. And of course, there are some things we have to be careful for, because the CRO is handling for multiple customers, and you don't want data from customer A to go to customer B. So that's.
Any more questions? I have a question to the audience. The word allotrope has been mentioned several times today already. Is everybody familiar what allotrope is? Who is not? Or should we explain a little bit? Yes or no? A quick elevator pitch on the allotrope, and Hans, correct me if I'm wrong. The Allotrope Foundation is a group of 15 or 16, I think now, pharma companies who are working in a pre-competitive manner on getting standardization done. So that's why the ADF, and then maybe you saw sometimes the word ADF, Allotrope Data Format, which is a standard format, or at least a format which enables you to really connect all kinds of different instrumentations, different technologies together. It's not only the data itself, it also includes working on the ontologies and everything associated with that, because that's even more important. So I know we will get some more presentations, and some companies are already using this ADF format, for example, for archiving. So it's not a commercial company. And they use a company called Ostus, and they are also here part of the sessions. And that's a technology company, and the Ostus company is one of the partners of Allotrope to really make it happen. So there's also significant money spent by those pharma companies to get this happen. And I think that's one of the deltas, one of the differences compared to other initiatives, what I've seen in the past, that's more like a freebie. So there's significant investment to make things happen. So that's the word Allotrope. So the Allotrope is really a format done initiated by, I would say, the major pharma companies on a global basis, both US as well as Europe. Okay. Hans, did I miss anything?
Yeah, basically, I think the explanation is okay. I think the only thing is that where the format is developing throughout time, and I think we are at the early stage still.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Hans.
Thank you.